It's good to see you today as we gather for another time of wandering toward wonder. I hope you're able to hear me. It looks like we're live. So we're just going to wait for a second. There we go. Good morning, friends. It's good to be with you today. My name is Will Ed Green. I serve as one of the associate pastors and the director of discipleship at Foundry United Methodist Church. And I am so glad to be joining you today as we journey together in a little wandering toward wonder. That's what we call this time that we set aside every Tuesday at 10 a.m., where we try to figure out some ways to cultivate joy and wonder and hope in our lives. I am, as I said, Will Ed Green. I'm one of the pastors at Foundry United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. I am tuning in this morning from my place here in DC in Brightwood Park, and I would love to know where it is you're joining in from today. So if you'll take a few moments and sound off in the comments section, let us know where is home for you as you're wandering in today. That's a way that we can celebrate that you've been with us today, and I hope that you will allow us to do that. So, I don't know about you, but maybe you, like me, breathed a sigh of relief last Wednesday, right? As predicted bouts of violence and rioting, both here in DC and around the country, didn't happen. I am not sure about you, but Wednesday came, and with it, the ability to rise a little taller, to breathe a little deeper, than I have in a really long period of time. People around the country have reported this, right? Changes in their sleep patterns, in their energy levels, in their relationships since the inauguration. And perhaps that's been true for you. If you've had that experience, or if you've been kind of living in that space, I'd love to know what's changed for you in these last couple of days, in this last week since the inauguration. Please share in the chat if you're willing to do so. And as I've been thinking about this shift, I've also had kind of running concurrently in my mind some words from Psalm 27 that I've been sitting with for some time, and I want to share those with you now. This is Psalm 27, beginning in the 3rd verse. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I asked of the Lord that I will seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in the Lord's temple. I think I've been sitting with some of those words because they capture the dichotomy of this moment that we find ourselves living in, right? On the one hand, there are many of us in the midst of the multiple pandemics that are unfolding around us that feel profoundly that feeling of an army encamped around us, of our enemies kind of having hemmed us in on all sides. And our enemies may be the short distance between our workstation and the refrigerator, or it may be the grief that we've deferred. But no matter the case, so many of us are sitting in spaces where we're holding really complicated, complex, and often painful realities in tension with this reality of hopefulness that seems to be emerging in some spaces in the world around us as the vaccine becomes available, as we see peaceful transitions of power. And I've noticed as we live in that space that there's this odd reaction that's going on, right? That people seem to keep wanting to say, today we celebrate and tomorrow we work. Even before the reality of presidential transition set in, people on both sides of the country's political divide began focusing in on what they were going to fix once it happened, right? We were already focused on a future that we hadn't even had yet. And I found myself thinking, you've got the psalmist over here talking about dwelling in the temple of the Lord despite all the pressure, despite all of the concern, despite all the need to fight back and push back and protect themselves. And yet here they are juxtaposing that with this image of dwelling in the presence of God. And I found myself thinking, it's as if we've forgotten in so many ways in our lives what it means to sit with or sit in or to rest in the gift of joy, the gift of space to breathe. Our identities have, in a lot of ways, and certainly I know this is true for me, become so intertwined with or confused with our need to fix things, to react to things, to resolve things, that we can't stop to even smell the roses, so to speak, because we're moving so fast that by the time we've realized there are roses to smell, they're 20 miles behind us. Do any of you find yourself kind of swimming in that sea? It's a familiar sea to me, I know. This space where I'm always kind of 6 steps ahead of myself, where I'm always trying to preempt or predict or prepare myself for the next thing. And particularly in a time when there is deep emotional trauma that we're all experiencing together, this isn't an unexpected response. The pressures of a particularly difficult 4 years, in which for many of us who had previously been able to wear the blinders of privilege or false patriotism even, have been rudely ripped off, right? These blinders have been ripped off, and we've been forced to confront all manner of systemic violence, racism, economic inequality, and the need for major justice reforms, among so many other things in our nation. And that's just been the last 4 years that we've been kind of swimming in that constant flow of stuff. And then when you layer into that the pressures of a pandemic, in which maintaining healthy balance between work and personal life, routines which draw us out of the endless pressure of the to-do list, when all of that has collapsed, what we're left with is this moment when perhaps we really do feel like, perhaps even subconsciously, we're behaving as if we've been encamped. We find ourselves surrounded by all of this stuff, and so we're constantly caught in this cycle of just wanting to get out. The appeal of constant pivoting or reaction is really the sense that it gives us agency or purpose, particularly at points in life like this one, where during a pandemic, where during a time of political transition and upheaval over which we had very little control individually, right? That sense of agency helps us feel like we're not so helpless as we are. Helps us feel like we're able to protect ourselves perhaps in a way that we can. Of course, what we know to be true is that even though this is all understandable, this need to react, to respond, to do, it's not sustainable. The addiction to kind of fix-it mode may be natural, and it may be rooted in an evolutionary bent toward fight or flight, with all the gifts of awareness that bent brings, but it's not something our bodies are made to do day in and day out. We're not meant to live our lives as if we're constantly under siege, or as if there's constantly more we have to do to fix or to get out. In fact, the longer we live in this state, we know the longer the neurochemicals that our brain releases in response to stress begins to rewire how we operate, how we function in the world. Eventually, our surge capacity, as it's sometimes called, or the amount of emotional resilience we're able to bring to bear in response to these emotions, it's overcome. And so what we're left with then is not only the fact that we're worn out, right, but the strength we might have otherwise drawn from, the hope we might have otherwise drawn from, the peace that we might have otherwise drawn from, to help us confront all of the stuff that's always in front of us is gone. We're left exhausted, depressed, constantly anxious. We have this funny way, it feels like, of gaslighting ourselves out of the experience of joy or hope or grief when we get caught in these cycles, focusing not on the power of those emotions to tell us what it is we need in that moment, but on the power we presume we have or we need to have in order to preserve that present joy or insulate ourselves against future pain. And so we get caught in this cycle of, today we celebrate, tomorrow we work, today we celebrate, tomorrow we work, and it's this never-ending movement. God's invitation to us in moments like these, though, I think comes to us in words like what the psalmist offers, an invitation to consider where it is we're dwelling, where it is we're investing ourselves, our energy, our time, how it is we're showing up and making ourselves present to other people and in the world, so that what we're doing is we're cultivating the spaces, the places, the energy we need to do the work that's before us in a sustainable way. A few weeks back, I shared a reflection on waiting as resistance, right? Waiting on God, waiting on ourselves, waiting on others, as a way of letting go of the demands to always do, right? And so if that's true, the second part of that really is this question of where are we going to dwell? Where are we going to put down our roots? Where are we going to stake our claim so that we can continue being who God has called us to be? You know, the word dwell, which is yashav in Hebrew, I think that's a pretty close approximation to its pronunciation. It means to literally sit down and set up shop. To abide in, to inhabit fully. And it implies this focused effort on remaining present to the world around us. In the case of the psalmist, choosing to remain present as those opportunities arise to the gift of being in God's presence, right? To resting in, to receiving, to celebrating, to owning the promises of God's love, protection, and mercy. Another image from Scripture came to mind, and I was thinking about this question of where we dwell, and it's the image of the resurrected Jesus, who, doesn't meet the disciples and immediately start talking about overthrowing the Roman Empire, right? He doesn't set up shop with them and start setting up stewardship campaigns or mission drives. He doesn't set up and start strategizing for how they're going to get rid of Pontius Pilate. No, in the Gospel of John, at least, Jesus meets the disciples, the newly resurrected Jesus meets the disciples on the seashore, and he makes them breakfast. On the road to Emmaus, the newly resurrected Jesus meets these two disciples who are caught up in the moment, these profound moments of grief and loss. And what does Jesus do? Does Jesus immediately chastise them? Does Jesus immediately, point out all of the pitfalls and perils in their theology? No, Jesus walks with them and they have a conversation. They have a conversation about what they're experiencing. And then it's when they choose to linger over a meal together that they realize who Jesus is, that they had in fact been with Jesus the entire time. Jesus models for us in those moments the same thing I think the psalmist does, which is what it looks like for God to join us in our grief and in our celebration, in our moments of heartbreak and hurt and fear and anxiety, and invites us to receive the gift of God's presence, to literally dwell in the promises of God's love and healing and mercy and grace we need to continue doing in the world. We need to continue doing what we're called to do, that is, in the world. No doubt Jesus knew that the disciples had a lot of work in front of them. No doubt Jesus knew that there was going to be a lot of heartache and struggle and need for strategizing. But Jesus also, I'm going to guess, knew that in that moment on the road to Emmaus, at the sea, that what they really needed was the space to sit and to receive, to rest, and to renew themselves, so that when that time came that they were called upon to continue doing the work that was in front of them, they had the full measure of strength they needed to do it. So what would happen if our mantra these days in response to things that bring us hope or joy or life wasn't to take a selfie and keep on working, or to say today we celebrate and tomorrow we work, but instead to focus on dwelling in the gift of that particular emotion as we're experiencing it? I don't mean to say that our weariness or the things that we carry mean that we just need to lay everything down and bury our heads in the sand. I'm not saying that we aren't called to work or witness or protest or preach or pray. I'm not talking about an invitation to stop showing up and doing the work. I'm talking about the gift that I so often need from the Spirit, which is the reminder that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to dwell in something other than our fear, our anxiety, our righteous indignation. It's okay that there are things left still to do that we haven't yet gotten to, and still to pause and be present when we're experiencing hopefulness, or when we're getting a better night's sleep, or when we're able to take a breath. It's okay to remember the invitations to self-awareness and growth and grief and heartache, and not rush past them in a way that we forget that God is present with us in those moments too. And it's absolutely okay to trust that even when we pause and rest in the present, whatever that thing we might be experiencing, whatever it is, that God will continue being present with us, not only there, but preparing for us and providing for us what we need to step forward, to step out, to keep on going when the time comes. So that's what I've been thinking about this week. And I would encourage you to maybe think about the places where you're dwelling in this season. Where are the places that you've chosen to set up shop? And what opportunities might there be? In places where that perhaps needs to shift a little bit, where your dwelling place needs to move on down the road a piece. What opportunities might there be for you to begin to make that move this week? I will certainly be praying for you as you consider all those things. I hope you will be praying for me as I do the same. I do want to remind you just really quickly before we sign off today of a couple of ways you can continue engaging in the gifts of ministry and community at Foundry. Of course, we have every week our pastoral reflections. Pastor Casey was yesterday and had a wonderful reflection and some thoughts and some fun insight into the rubrics cube as a gift for spiritual formation. At least that's how I received it. Tomorrow we have Ponderings from the Purple Parlor with Pastor Ginger. On Thursday we have Pastor Kelly with her presentation, and then of course Pastor Ben at 10 on Friday. So we hope you'll join those. We also want to make sure that you know that there are a number of upcoming ways to participate in all the Lenten programming at Foundry this season. So we're going to drop 2 links into the comment section now. The first allows you to register for our soon-to-be released Lenten devotional. We're very excited about that particular resource. It's written by people from all across our congregation and indeed our connection. We have a couple of special guest writers this year. So we hope that you'll sign up to receive that gift and participate in all that it has to offer. We also want to invite you to sign up for one of our Lenten worship boxes if you would like. That's got all kinds of resources for engaging both with a deeper look at the devotional, but also resources for worship during the Lenten season. And so we hope that you'll consider signing up for that. Friends, it has been good to be with you today. Thank you for the chance to just sit and wander a bit. I will continue praying for you. And just remember, as always, that God loves you, that we love you, and keep on finding ways to wander towards wonder. Until next time, friends.